Welcome to Lab 2. Today, we're going to go through cells, all the different parts of a cell, and then we're going to start going through the first part of tissues. So let's look at a cell. A cell has a lot of different things happening, a lot of different parts inside of it. So all of our cells are going to have some form of plasma membrane. This plasma membrane is that outside of that cell. It helps to hold what's inside of that cell inside. It keeps everything there. Our cell has these centrioles. These centrioles are helping to make the cytoskeleton, per se, of that cell. Those centrioles make up that centrosome. We have chromatin. Chromatin is found within that nucleus. It's going to be some of that part of that nuclear material within that nucleus. The cytoplasm is that liquid inside of our cell. That's that cytoplasm, is that liquid found inside of the cells. Plus all of the organelles that make all of that up. The cytosol is the true liquid. So the cytoplasm is kind of everything in there, the liquid plus all these different organelles going on. Cytosol is that fluid. We have our Golgi complex. Our Golgi complex takes proteins that are made inside of our cell, and it helps those proteins kind of mature into whatever job they're going to do. Lysosomes kind of help clean up the inside of the cell. They're green. The mitochondria. Mitochondria makes all of the energy for our cells. So there's usually several mitochondria to hundreds of mitochondria, depending on how much energy that cell is going to need. We have our nuclear membrane, or nuclear envelope as it's called here. That is the cell layer that wraps around that specific nucleus. The nucleolus, which is found in the middle of that nucleus. Ribosomes. Ribosomes are all of these little blue dots that you see throughout this cell. Ribosomes are attached to this rough endoplasmic reticulum. They are what make our cells proteins. So you can see the little blue dot that this is pointing to. That's the ribosome that's attached to that endoplasmic reticulum. We also have a smooth endoplasmic reticulum. It's smooth because there's no ribosomes on it. That smooth endoplasmic reticulum makes fats for our cells. It makes cholesterol. It makes hormones, depending on what cell it's coming from. Mitosis. So in mitosis, what is happening is we are taking one cell and we are making an identical copy of that specific cell. So during the first stage of mitosis, we have prophase. Prophase is where this nucleus or this nuclear membrane is going to disappear. These chromosomes that look like little X's, those are your chromosomes, your DNA, are going to get themselves towards the middle of that cell. They're going to start working their way towards that middle. Metaphase is when those chromosomes are lined up in those nice, neat rows in the middle. Metaphase starts with an M. Middle, if that helps to kind of remember where that's located. Anaphase is where those chromosomes split in half. So now we can start to see two separate groups of chromosomes here. Here they're starting to split apart. Here you can see those chromosomes are in one nice neat row. Then telophase, the last phase, that nuclear membrane comes back to form that nucleus in that cell. Our chromosomes, again, are towards that. We have those two separate cells forming this membrane. You can see here is kind of pinching off to create two separate cells. You can start to see those two separate cells form. By the end of telophase, we have two identical cells. So let's look at some of these, because these are pictures that are going to show up on your first lab practical, and you're going to need to be able to tell me what phase of replication these cells are at. Let's look at ones that are labeled first, then we'll come back up to this group. So if you look at the labeled ones here, we don't have to worry about interphase. Interphase is kind of that phase between, like right after they finished replicating and before they start the next phase of replicating. So we don't really have to worry about interphase. But here we have a prophase at this specific cell right here. You can see the squiggly lines is a kind of the best way to put that. Within those kind of squiggly lines, you can see things are, something is starting to happen compared to the cell next to it. You can start to see the chromosomes, that DNA, start to move around. Metaphase, they are traveling, those chromosomes are traveling towards that, or their chromosomes not traveling, they are in that middle of that cell. So we have this large cell right here with those chromosomes all in the middle. Anaphase. Anaphase is when those two groups of chromosomes are splitting off. Think if I had a telophase here. Here, you can see the telophase. So you can see these two different groups of chromosomes that kind of pick up darker stain, and you can see this middle where this cell is kind of pinching off. So all of these different phases here are labeled. There will be a couple of slides on your first lab practical that are labeling the different phases of mitosis. They will be off of these slides, these exact pictures here that are labeled. So you will know, okay, if you see this picture, this is anaphase. If you see this picture, that's prophase. If you see this one highlighted, that one's metaphase. Same here, that one would be anaphase. Here's a metaphase, that one kind of looks like metaphase, that one looks like a metaphase. Here's that telophase. Let's look at some others. There's anaphase. The cell hasn't started pinching off yet, but you have those two different groups of chromosomes splitting apart. Here you can see those early parts of anaphase because they're starting to split apart. Metaphase, they're all lined up in the middle. Prophase, you start to see something's happening. So these are the exact slides that I would use. And then this, whatever one I'm asking you, it would be highlighted. Asking you what phase of mitosis is this cell in? To let you know, these practicals are fill in the blank and spelling does count. I do, after the due date for each of these exams, I do go through them. And I check to make sure that what you put is the correct answer. Because I do have the correct answer in, but it doesn't always match up. Extra space somewhere, it marks things wrong. So don't count your answers until I have the chance to go through them after that due date. So let's look down at epithelial cells. This is the first group of cells I went through in lab 1. Those specific tissues, these usually line something. So let's go through how they're arranged and their shape, because if you know their arranged layers and their shape, you can just look at tissues and tell what they are. You don't need to memorize. This looks like simple squamous. You can look at it and say, it's a single layer of flat cells. So simple squamous. So we use, this is the first part of the name. This is the second part of their name. How are they arranged? Are they one row of cells? Are they more than one row of cells? Or does it look like more than one row, but it's really not? So let's look. These simple. Simple means it is a single layer. One layer of cells. I'm going to skip this middle one for a second. Stratified is the word for more than one layer of cells. Then we have this layer that is called pseudo-stratified. It is pseudo-stratified because every cell is going to touch that basement membrane, this bottom part, but not every cell is going to come to the top. So you can see like this cell right here does not go to the top. This cell does not go to the top. But this cell here, this one goes all the way to the top. So it looks like it's more than one layer, but it is not. That's why it's pseudo, because pseudo means false. So pseudo-stratified means it's false. It looks like it's more than one layer, but it's really not. Now let's look at cell shape. We have flat cells. Flat is squamous. Squamous means flat. This is your skin. This is a good example. The top layer, the visible part of the skin that you see is squamous cells. They are flat cells. Then we have cuboidal. Cuboidal, when we're looking on slides, you're only going to see it in 2D. So they kind of look square, but if they are in 3D like this picture, they're going to be cubed. So they're kind of that square or cube shape. That's where cuboidal comes from. Then we have columnar. Columnar are those columns, those tall columns. In 2D, they're going to look like rectangles. So let's look at some of these. I've got lots of examples because these will be the exact slides that you're going to see when you take the practical exam. So the first one we have here is simple squamous. Simple because it's one layer of cells. Squamous because they are those flattened out cells. This is in your lungs. That's the picture of the lungs here. Those little air sacs in your lungs where oxygen gets absorbed into your blood and carbon dioxide gets taken out of your blood and you breathe that out. This is the tissue where this happens. This is a single layer of flat cells. Your blood vessels, the inside layer of your blood vessels has this simple squamous. Most of those serosa we talked about from lab 1, those are those simple squamous. Your kidneys, where you filter out waste products from your blood, those are simple squamous. Simple squamous cells are really good at diffusion and filtration. So diffusion is that movement of particles, and then filtration is filtering through those certain substances. Osmosis is that movement of water. Diffusion is that movement of particles specifically. Now we have simple cuboidal. It's a single layer of cells. That's what makes it simple. And then there's these cube or square-like cells. So if we look at this picture here, we can see some really good examples of these square type cells. This is in your kidney. This is where we're filtering different substances as well. So here, single layer of these kind of square cube-like cells. They're really good at that secretion. So getting rid of something and absorbing something back up. Some different small glands in your body. The ovary, the surface of the ovary has simple cuboidal. You don't need to know where this stuff is located. You just need to know what this tissue looks like. Our next tissue is simple columnar. Simple because it's that single layer. Columnar, it's those tall column-like cells. So we have these tall kind of column-like cells found throughout. This is in your small intestine, some of your large intestine. I'm going to give you a clue with this one. Look at the nuclei. The nuclei were lined up pretty well. They're pretty well in a straight line. That'll help when we get to the pseudo-stratified. So there are these tall cells and the nuclei are pretty well in a single, in line with each other. These, since they're in your intestines, they do well with absorption. They secrete out a mucus. So let's look for a second. We have some cells found throughout. See all this white here that I'm circling? That is a goblet cell. Goblet cells secrete out mucus. We secrete out mucus into our digestive tract to help lubricate, to keep things moving. So we've got several goblet cells here. This one is starting to release out its contents. So you're going to see some of these mucus cells throughout. But you're looking for these tall cells where the nuclei are pretty well lined up in a single line. I said that because here is that pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Pseudo again means it's false. So I want a color that'll stick out. So you can see like this cell here touches the bottom, but so does this cell. This cell is going to go up a lot higher. These two cells here stay down below, but then this one kind of pushes up and around. We also have a lot of those goblet cells in here with all that mucus that we just talked about. In the pseudostratified columnar epithelium, look at the nuclei. There's some nuclei towards the bottom. There's some nuclei towards the middle. There's some nuclei towards the top. There's nuclei all over the place, which is why I pointed out the nuclei in this simple columnar. They're in that nice, neat straight line. Pseudostratified, those nuclei are all over the place. And on your list, there is no stratified columnar. Stratified columnar is found in certain areas within the body. It's pretty rare, but it is found in some places. But we do not have a stratified columnar. So if it looks like nuclei all over the place, it's probably pseudostratified. Now we have stratified squamous. It is stratified because it is several layers of cells. When we're looking at stratified cells, we always look at the top layer to determine what type of cells it is. So we're looking for that top layer of cells. This top layer here, it's pretty flat. These cells here, the ones that still have a nuclei, for the most part are pretty flat. The bottom may look more more cuboidal, but that top is not. That top is flat cells. So we're looking at the top layer to be able to name it. So we have many layers of cells because our cells start all the way down here at that bottom. And then we have all of these layers all the way up. That's where we get that stratified squamous. This is more in areas to protect. So your mouth is a good example. Your skin is another good example. Your esophagus, the vagina, good examples of where you'd see this stratified squamous, this many, 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 many layers of flat cells. And then we have transitional epithelium. Transitional epithelium are cells of many different shapes and sizes. This is found in your bladder down here, but it's also found in these ureters that take that urine down. Even the first part of the urethra is even some of this transitional epithelium. Here's a hint on determining transitional versus stratified cuboidal. On your list, there is no stratified cuboidal, but stratified cuboidal in our body is no more than 2 layers. So if you see many, many, many layers of cells, so you can kind of see these different shapes. Some of them may appear longer. Some of them down here, pretty tiny. They're all over the place. There's just all different shapes everywhere. Because if I said for stratified, we're looking at those top layers. There's just lots of different shapes. But what makes transitional epithelium different than any other type of epithelial tissue is that it stretches. It's able to stretch, say as your bladder fills with urine, it's going to stretch to hold that amount of urine that has been produced. So let's look at some other examples here. So we've got a blood vessel. This blood vessel, this single layer of cells found within this blood vessel is that simple squamous epithelium. You'll see the names up in the top corner here. And then it'll point to these different pictures. Here is we're looking face down on a single layer of cells. So again, it's that simple squamous epithelium. We have what looks like flat cells. From this level, this is what this looks like. Now we're into simple cuboidal. So let's kind of zoom in. We can see more cube. This one's pretty far away still. Cells. So there's kind of those squared shaped cells. If we come in closer, here's that simple cuboidal epithelium again. So we still have these square cells. They're simple because it's one layer of these squared cells. Still that simple cuboidal. These are in your thyroid and your neck. This makes hormones that regulate your metabolism. So we've got these almost square-like cells. Here is a simple columnar epithelium. Again, we have these tall, narrow cells. And look at the nuclei. They are pretty well lined up. Here's another example of that simple columnar. So these nice tall cells here. With those nuclei in that nice neat row. Now here's pseudostratified. It's pretty similar to the picture we looked at before. This just has a whole heck of a lot more goblet cells in it. So we've got some cells at the bottom. We've got some that kind of pinch up and off, come over, come up to the top. Some of these you see like the very bottom, and then it comes out and opens up wide. You can see how most of these cells come down to the bottom. While not every cell is going to make it to the top. That is what makes it that pseudo stratified columnar epithelium. Here's another example of that pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. This is in your trachea, so that windpipe that lets you breathe. Here is stratified squamous epithelium. This is in the vagina. So, like this layer starts all the way down here, and it goes all the way up. You can see the different shapes of the cells, but we look at this very top layer. This very top layer are these pretty flat cells kind of found throughout. That is that squamous. They're flat. That's stratified because it's more than one layer. Here's another example. Starts all the way down here and it goes all the way up. We've got plenty of these flat, you can see, we can even see this one falling off there. Flat cells kind of found throughout the top. And since we're looking at that top layer, that gives us that squamous. Now we know it's many, many layers, so it's stratified. Another example. This is in your esophagus, so where your food goes from your mouth down to your stomach. So we've got these really flat cells across the top, and this goes many, many layers. Now we have transitional. Transitional, these cells they start around here, they go up to here. You can't really figure out what shape these cells even are. Some are flat, some are round, some are cube shaped. But this is going to be tissue that stretches. Here's a better example of this transitional epithelium. Remember, as I said, those cuboidal cells are not found in more than 2 layers in the human body. And this is multiple layers of what looks like these cube-shaped cells. Since that's those multiple layers of that cube-shaped cells, it's got to be transitional because in our body, there's only 2 layers. When we have stratified cuboidal, it's only 2 layers, and that's usually found in glands, like your sweat glands. And that's not on your list, so you don't need to know it. So if you see something like this with lots and lots of layers of cube kind of shaped cells, that's got to be transitional. Here's another example of that transitional. These cells almost kind of start to have this teardrop kind of shape. So a lot of these cells here, you can kind of see that here. So there's a lot of shapes kind of found throughout. These make that transitional epithelium because there's just many, many layers of little kind of larger type of cells, and they stretch. So these are the exact pictures that I'm going to use. They will not be labeled like this. You will just see the specific tissue highlighted, and it'll ask you what type of tissue it is. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and thank you for listening. Bye.